The Heir of Pemberley. Copyright Jarmo Palamaki. Chapter 1. The late afternoon sun bathed the overgrown garden of Rosings Park in golden hues as Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy stood before Elizabeth Bennet, his jaw tight, his posture rigid with an unease unbecoming of his usual poise. The path beneath their feet, choked with weeds, seemed to mirror the tangled knots of his heart. He had not come to Hansford intending to propose. Circumstance, or perhaps fate, had drawn him here, to her. "I have struggled in vain," Darcy began, his voice low but steady, though his eyes betrayed the tempest within. "It will not do. I must tell you how ardently I admire and love you." He paused, his gloved fingers clenching at his side. "But there were so many obstacles in my mind. Your lower social standing, the lack of connections, the absence of a dowry." Elizabeth, who had been watching him with an arched brow, suddenly raised a hand. "Before you proceed, Mr. Darcy," she interrupted, her tones sharper than the hedges trimming the garden, "there is a matter you must understand, one that may alter everything you are about to say." Darcy halted, his brows knitting. "Pray, proceed, Miss Bennet." The surname felt foreign on his tongue, but he forced it out, as if refusing to acknowledge her true name might undo her words. Elizabeth took a measured breath, her gaze never leaving his. "I am not the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. I never was." She stepped forward, her voice gaining strength. "I am the daughter of the late Mrs. Sarah Clark, sister to Mr. Bennet. My mother's brother, who took me in after her death, has treated me as his own. But my lineage is not Bennet, nor is Mary's, for she is my stepsister, born of the Clarks." "Mary is your stepsister?" Darcy Elizabeth asked, pausing to pluck a withered leaf from a climbing ivy. "So your father is not Mr. Clark?" Elizabeth Clark lifted her gaze from the garden and met Darcy's eyes, steady and unflinching. "No," she said softly. "Mr. Clark was kind enough to marry my mother before my birth, and he raised me as his own. But he was not my father." Darcy's brows lifted in surprise. "Then, forgive my bluntness, are you an illegitimate child of Mrs. Clark?" A faint smile touched Elizabeth's lips, tinged not with shame, but with sorrow. "That is what many of my relatives believe. My mother never denied it, nor confirmed it. She allowed the rumors to flourish, knowing they would protect me." "Protect you?" Darcy frowned. "From what?" Elizabeth turned to face her fully, the morning light catching the russet highlights in her dark hair. Hair that Darcy now noticed bore a striking resemblance to someone she knew all too well. "Before I answer," Elizabeth said, "tell me, do you know anyone in your acquaintance who resembles me?" Darcy studied her closely, the high cheekbones, the deep-set gray-green eyes, the proud tilt of her chin. A name surfaced in her mind, unbidden, from the margins of family lore. Lady Matlock, his aunt. Lady Matlock, Marguerite Fitzwilliam, had been famed at court for her beauty, a woman whose grace had once rivaled the queens of the realm, and now standing before her was that same face, only softer, younger. Darcy paled. You look very much like Lady Matlock, my aunt by marriage, the one who wed the Earl of Matlock." Elizabeth nodded slowly. "Exactly, and she had a brother." Silence fell between them, broken only by the distant call of a peacock. "The Duke of Pemberley," Darcy whispered. Darcy stepped back instinctively. "But everyone believes the Duke has no living issue. He withdrew from society 20 years ago after his wife's death and has been seen by no one since. I only know he still lives because I manage Pemberley on the Duke's behalf, and I stay in contact with his solicitor." "So is the Duke really your father? How is that possible? As far as I know, he has no children and was never married, although he wrote about an unknown heir. Are you his heiress? Was your mother his mistress before marrying Mr. Clark?" "I am," answered Elizabeth, "but my mother was not his mistress. In fact, she was still maiden when I was born." "How is that possible?" wondered Darcy. "Please explain." Chapter 2. Elizabeth began, her voice steady. "My mother, Mrs. Sarah Clark, was once a maid at Pemberley. Her father, neglectful of his estate, left her destitute. To survive, she entered service. First to your own family. I owe you this truth. Darcy stiffened, his gaze sharpening. Go on. Mrs. Clark met my father, William Clark, a modest schoolmaster, within those very halls. They fell in love, yet poverty bound them. Marriage was impossible, children, unthinkable. So when the Duke of Pemberley learned of their plight, he offered a peculiar kindness. Her hands clenched at her sides. He required an heir, and they required financial support for their life together. An understanding was struck. A physician would see to it that my mother bore his child, not by violation, but by science, a method of his devising, whispered in parlors as a marvel of the age. Darcy's jaw tightened. You are asserting that you are the issue of such an arrangement? Aye, she said, her chin lifting. Though I was born of love, not lust, when the Duke's doctor, his name is lost to me, visited under cover of night, he brought a vial of his seed, a syringe, they called it. I was their compact's fulfillment. My mother remained chaste as promised, even up to my birth. The midwife's astonishment at her condition was great. Silence fell between them, broken only by the rustle of wind through branches. Darcy's eyes darkened, not with disdain, but with a tempest of realization. You were raised by the Bennets? Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Clark perished in a fever when I was 7. The Bennets, ever merciful, took my younger stepsister and me in. They called us their own, and we repaid them with loyalty. Yet I have never denied the blood that precedes me. The Bennets knew nothing of this. Their kindness needed no taint of your family's patronage. For a moment he seemed to wrestle with unseen thoughts. Then his tone grew grave. You must understand, Elizabeth, what you've revealed. It is not a blemish, but neither is it conventional. Nor is it a crime, she interjected, her voice rising. They called it a kindness, a transaction of flesh and desperation. A long pause stretched between them. Darcy's eyes drifted to the horizon, where the forest met the sky. Your mother's choice. It must have been terrible, he murmured, to bear such a child, with no promise of affection. She had his husband's affection and my father's financial support, Elizabeth replied, and she believed my life could offer them both a future. She named me after her mother, who died young, a testament to the life she could not have. Darcy stared at her, his mind racing. Every word she spoke unraveled a mystery he had long sensed but refused to acknowledge. Her poise beyond her supposed station, her fearless intelligence, the way she met his pride with equal measure. And yet, could it be true? When will you take your rightful place as Duchess of Pemberley? He asked at last. In 6 months, she answered, on my 21st birthday. Then I shall be formally acknowledged. The seals of inheritance, the letters patent, the ducal signet. All await that moment. And there are no proofs now? Darcy pressed. None visible, she said. My father decreed it so. He foresaw the danger. Not from rebellion, but from greed. Fortune hunters would swarm, sycophants would smile too wide, and men would court me not for my mind or heart, but for the diamonds of Pemberley. So he ruled that until I came of age, no proof would be offered. Not to society, not to suitors, not even to you. Darcy clenched his jaw. But how am I to believe you? How can I not suspect this to be some elaborate ruse? Elizabeth met his eyes, unflinching. My father anticipated men like you, she said softly. Men of honor, but bound by reason. He said that if a man truly loved me, not the title, not the estate, but me, he would believe me on faith. And if he did not, he would release me. She stepped closer, the hem of her gown brushing the dew-laden grass. He said, if he cannot believe a woman who speaks truth with no proof, then he is not fit to stand beside her when the world knows her name. And so, Mr. Darcy, the choice lies with you. Do you believe me? The wind stilled. Somewhere in the distance, a nightingale began to sing. Darcy looked at her, not at the imagined heiress, but at the woman he had come to admire, the one who challenged him, who laughed in the face of rank, who walked in the rain with a book in her hand and fire in her soul. He thought of the hours he had spent watching her from a distance, the way his pulse quickened at her voice, the way his dreams were haunted by her eyes. And he thought of Pemberley, the true Pemberley, the ancestral seat of a ducal house older than the monarchy itself. If Elizabeth were truly its heir, then she was not merely a woman of fortune. She was a queen in waiting. Yet none of that mattered. What mattered was this, that she had told him the truth, knowing he might scorn her, that she offered him no evidence, demanding only belief, that in 6 months the world would know, and he could wait. There is an additional condition, continued Elizabeth. My father has decided that anyone who would like to marry me must be engaged with me before my 21st birthday. So do not wait too long. It will soon be too late. For my part, I admire and love you. You are a respectful, honest, reliable, and capable steward of the estate of my father. Not like that Mr. Wickham, who has stolen from my father, deceived him, and destroyed much of his property. When I will take over the estate, both of you will get according to your faithfulness. You know of Mr. Wickham? Darcy replied. That's good. That's a piece of proof for you speaking the truth. However, I think I still need some time to think about all. You told me an unbelievable story. I just need to think about that. The danger to get engaged with an illegitimate daughter would ruin me. You need to follow your heart, not your mind, Elizabeth answered. Do not wait too long. It will soon be too late. You must be ready to share my shame to be found worthy to share my honor. Chapter 3. The fire in the grate crackled softly as rain tapped a solemn rhythm against the tall, mullioned window of Mr. Darcy's chamber at Rosings Park. Candlelight flickered across the oak-paneled walls, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to mirror the inner storm that raged within him. The night air carried the earthy scent of drenched hedgerows, but Darcy scarcely noticed. His mind was transfixed, haunted even, by every word Elizabeth Bennet had spoken in the morning. He had meant to propose. Oh, how carefully he had planned it. He had composed each phrase in his mind as he paced beneath the dripping laurels. Words of admiration for her spirit, acknowledgement of his own flaws, and a declaration of love formed despite station and circumstance. But before he could utter a syllable, she had turned to him with eyes like storm-lit emeralds and spoken words that struck him to the core. I am not, as you believe, the daughter of a country gentleman of modest means. I am the Duchess of Pemberley. The memory sent a shiver through him, not of cold, but of disbelief. He had stared at her, speechless. Could it be possible? She had explained, a tale so improbable it bordered on fantasy, her true lineage concealed, her father sworn to protect her identity. She was born to be a duchess, and by blood right, the title and lands of Pemberley were hers. Your estate? He had whispered, stunned. She had nodded. You as steward have managed it in trust. My mother died when I was an infant. My guardians feared for my safety in turbulent times and sent me to live in obscurity. I was to reclaim my name in the right time. She looked him directly in the eyes. That time will be soon. Darcy paced the length of the room, his boots clicking against the floor. He had spent weeks scrutinizing Elizabeth, her wit, her poise, her unyielding moral compass. He admired her defiance and intelligence, though he had once deemed them improper. Yet never had he considered she might be more than his equal, not merely in spirit, but in blood. Still, doubt gnawed at him. Could he trust such a revelation, delivered in private with no witnesses, no proof? If she lied, the consequences were catastrophic. Marrying her would bind him to a fortune built on deception. Worse, it would stain the Darcy name forever. He would be the man who married a charlatan, laughed at from London to Bath. But if she spoke the truth, then he, Fitzwilliam Darcy, had stood on the precipice of refusing the hand of the most exalted unmarried woman in England. Pemberley was grandest not by coincidence, but by design. For centuries, it had stood as a monument to noble lineage, its marble halls echoing with the footsteps of dukes and peers. And now he was told it would belong to her? He sank into a leather armchair, rubbing his temples. The weight of responsibility pressed upon him. Could he allow sentiment to override duty? And yet, her eyes, the certainty in her voice, the way she spoke of Pemberley not with greed, but with sorrow and longing, as if the wind through its trees whispered memories too painful to name. But could this all be just to trap him in a marriage to an illegal daughter of a maidservant? But if that had been Elizabeth's purpose, why had she then explained anything? She had interrupted him when it was clear that he would propose. Mr. Darcy, alone in his chamber in Rosings Park, clutched an old leather-bound Bible his father had given him at confirmation. The weight of uncertainty pressed on his chest, but a voice in his heart, quiet yet insistent, urged him to seek wisdom. Kneeling in a silent prayer, he opened the Bible at random and found himself staring at Matthew 1:23-25. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, took Mary home as his wife, but he did not consummate their marriage until she gave birth. His breath caught. The similarity to Elizabeth's story was astonishing. Darcy flipped further, his fingers brushing the worn pages. Until John 1:11 met his eyes. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. The Bennet family's peculiarities, the mother's silliness, the father's sardonic wit, had once repelled him. Yet even they, his own kin by potential union, dismissed Elizabeth's worth. Elizabeth had endured their scorn, and still she stood unwavering. A spark of resolve flickered in him. If he loved her, he must stand against their unbelief. As shadows lengthened, Darcy turned to Romans 8:16-17. The Spirit himself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. If indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. His hand trembled. To share Elizabeth's honor meant embracing her struggles, her disgrace in society, the shame of a family that lacked decorum. Yet the promise of something better, of love that transcended earthly judgment, burned in his heart. Would he abandon her now, when she needed a partner who bore her cross with her? Lady Catherine would howl, the ton would gossip. But what were their opinions compared to the glory of a life entwined with Elizabeth? Darcy closed the Bible, his pulse quickening. The memory of Elizabeth's words returned. You must follow your heart, not your mind, to know the truth. He recalled their walks in Meryton, her laughter, the fire in her eyes when he declared himself. John 8:31-32 had said, If ye continue in my word, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. His mind had argued against it 1,000 times, but his heart had always known. Without Elizabeth, his soul felt unmoored, a ship adrift in a storm. To be without her would be to live without a true life. He would trust her words. Chapter 4. The morning mist clung to the hedgerows of Rosings Park like a morning veil, soft and silver in the early light. Dew glistened on every blade of grass, and the air carried the faint, earthy scent of damp soil and blooming hawthorn. As Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy walked slowly down the gravel path toward the secluded stone bench beneath the beech trees, where he had encountered Miss Elizabeth Bennet the previous day, he felt as though the world had shifted on its axis. His footfalls were measured, deliberate, echoing the steady rhythm of a heart that had, at long last, found its true compass. He was not surprised to see her there. Elizabeth stood with her back to him, a shawl wrapped tightly about her shoulders, her figure framed by the pale amber glow of dawn. She turned as he approached, her dark eyes wide with something between apprehension and hope. You came, she said simply, her voice clear despite the quiet. I could not stay away, Darcy replied, removing his hat and standing before her. What you told me yesterday, it has haunted me through the night. She lowered her gaze, a faint flush rising in her cheeks. I did not expect you to believe me. And yet, he said slowly, I do. Not merely because your words bore the ring of truth, but because I listened, as you bade me, to my own heart. Elizabeth looked up sharply. Your heart? Not the heart of a man raised on the rigid doctrines of precedent and inheritance, he clarified, but the heart of a man who has loved you in silence, against reason, against expectation, against every dictate of pride and position. A silence settled between them, profound and fragile as the morning itself. A lark rose from the hedgerow, singing into the softening sky. "You must understand, Miss Bennet," Darcy began, then stopped, shook his head. "Elizabeth, you must understand what you ask of me, what I now ask of myself. If what you have told me is true, that you are not the daughter of Mr. Bennet of Longbourn, but rather the child of a maidservant, and your father not being her husband, then society will regard you as illegitimate. Your name, your standing, your claim to gentility, all will be questioned. I know this," she said quietly. "I have long known it. My mother, Mrs. Clark, told it to me, and Mr. Bennet, my uncle, could not bring himself to abandon his niece after my mother and her husband died. So he brought me home, named me as his own." Darcy inhaled sharply. The story was extraordinary, scandalous even, but he did not doubt it. "And you have said nothing?" he asked. "To whom? To my sisters, who would despise me, to the world which would scorn me. No, I have lived with the truth in silence, but I could not let you go on believing in a fiction. If you were to consider me as your equal, your match, then you must know the fullness of who I am." Darcy stepped closer. The breeze stirred the hem of her dress, and he saw the fear in her face. Not for herself, he realized, but for him, for the burdens she feared she placed upon him. She was still unsure if he would trust her that her father was the Duke of Pemberley. "Elizabeth," he said, his voice low but resolute, "do you believe I am so shallow as to be swayed only by blood and title? I have spent my life bound by such chains. I have followed duty, tradition, expectation, every step measured by the opinions of others. But in finding you, I have discovered something far more powerful, the truth of my own soul. I just cannot live without you." Elizabeth's breath caught. "Darcy, you must know what that means. Until my father makes me known as his heiress, your station, your name would be tainted." "And what is a name without honor?" he countered. "What is a fortune without love? I have seen what becomes of marriages built on convenience. My own father's was one such. Cold, empty. I will not repeat that error. I cannot." He took her hand, warm despite the morning chill. "I love you, Elizabeth, not for your supposed birth, nor for any advantage you might bring me. I love you for your wit, your strength, your unyielding spirit. I love you because when you speak, I hear truth. Because when you laugh, the world feels brighter. Because when I am with you, I am not merely a gentleman. I am a man, alive and free." Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she did not look away. "I believe you," he said after a while. Elizabeth blinked, as though unprepared for the swiftness of his answer. "You do?" "I do," Darcy said firmly, "not because I have seen a seal or a signature, but because the woman standing before me now, proud, honest, unafraid, is incapable of deception. If you were not who you claim, you would not have waited. You would not have endured the slights, the assumptions of society, the sting of being called inferior, when you are, in truth, above us all." A smile, small and tremulous, touched Elizabeth's lips. "And if I were lying?" she whispered. "Then I would be a fool," Darcy replied, "but a fool who loved truly. And I would rather be that than a man who measured love by proofs and documents." Elizabeth's eyes glistened. "Then you understand my father's design. He did not wish for a husband who kneeled before a title. He wished for one who would stand beside me, whether I wore silk or sackcloth." Darcy reached for her hand. "I do not need 6 months to know my heart. I have loved you since long before I understood why. And in 6 months, when the world kneels before the Duchess of Pemberley, I shall be the only man who remembers the girl who danced in the rain at Rosings, who defied Lady Catherine, who saw through my pride, and loved me despite it. And if I say yes, if I accept this madness, this beautiful, terrifying risk, then I shall consider myself the most fortunate man in England," he said, and I will spend the rest of my days proving to you and to the world that love need not obey the rules of society. It obeys only the heart. A smile broke through her tears, radiant as the sun climbing above the eastern trees. Then yes, she whispered, 1,000 times, yes. Darcy drew her into his arms, and for the first time in his life, he felt no restraint, no pride, no fear, only certainty. They stood thus, embraced beneath the ancient beech, as the garden stirred to life around them. Birds calling, bees humming in the clover, the distant chime of Rosings' clock marking the hour of a new beginning. It was not a union that society would easily accept. There would be letters of outrage from Lady Catherine, gossip in Almack's, whispers in drawing rooms from Bath to Brighton, but none of it mattered. For in that quiet morning at Rosings, amid dew and dappled light, two souls had chosen truth over tradition, love over legacy, and in doing so they had forged a bond that no title, no law, no force in England could sever. Darcy pressed a gentle kiss to Elizabeth's brow. "We shall face it together," he murmured. "And I," she replied, leaning into him, "shall never regret the morning I told you the truth." The sun rose higher, gilding the parkland in gold. Somewhere a gardener whistled. Life moved forward. And at last, so did they. Chapter 5. 6 months later. The grand drawing room of Pemberley Hall shimmered beneath the glow of 1,000 candles. Crystal chandeliers dripped light upon gilded ceilings, and silk-draped windows framed the undulating hills of Derbyshire beneath a tranquil autumn moon. The air hummed with the low murmur of aristocratic voices, lords, ladies, members of Parliament, and even a distant cousin of the Prince Regent, gathered on the Duke of Pemberley's long-awaited invitation. For weeks, speculation had rippled through London's drawing rooms. What grand occasion warranted such a display? A betrothal? A political alliance? A royal visit? At precisely 9 o'clock, the Duke, a tall, silver-haired man of dignified bearing, rose from his armchair near the marble hearth. Silence fell like velvet. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice resonant and assured, "I thank you for gracing Pemberley with your presence this evening. You have all been kind enough to wonder why I summoned so many of England's most cherished minds and noble families under one roof. Tonight, at long last, I reveal the truth." A hush deepened. The Duke's gaze softened as he turned toward a young woman standing beside a quietly composed gentleman in a tailored black coat, Fitzwilliam Darcy. "This young lady," the Duke said, extending a hand toward her, "has long been known as Miss Elizabeth Bennet, the daughter of a country gentleman. But I declare before you all this evening, she is my daughter, my legitimate daughter." Gasps rippled through the room. The Duchess of Kent clutched her fan. Lord Matlock nearly dropped his wine. "At the time of her birth," the Duke continued, "circumstances forced her mother and me to conceal her existence and our mutual contract. Her mother passed away when Elizabeth was only 7, believing secrecy was the only way to protect her child. I placed Elizabeth in the care of a loyal gentleman, raising her as Miss Bennet to shield her from danger and intrigue." His voice wavered slightly, but pride steadied it. "But no longer. Elizabeth is my blood, my heir, and the future Duchess of Pemberley." The room erupted in stunned silence, then thunderous applause. Gentlewomen rose to curtsy. Men bowed deeply. Amid the swell of respect, Elizabeth stood tall, her eyes glistening, not with tears of sorrow, but of vindication. "And there is more," the Duke said, turning to Darcy. "This man, Fitzwilliam Darcy, my nephew by marriage, and a man of unimpeachable honor, has proven himself not only a worthy son of his father, but a noble partner to my daughter. They have been quietly married 3 weeks past in a private ceremony, and I now present to you the future stewards of Pemberley, the Lord and Lady Darcy, co-heirs to the Pemberley estate and title." Darcy straightened, his hand instinctively finding Elizabeth's. A rare, radiant smile touched his lips, one reserved only for her. The crowd surged forward with congratulations. The Archbishop of Canterbury offered his blessing. A duke from the north clapped Darcy on the back. Even Lord Matlock, who had once publicly denounced the union as an abomination against blood and station, offered a stiff, reluctant nod, though her lips remained pinched. Elizabeth stood quietly among the glittering sea of faces, allowing the moment to wash over her. Not so long ago, she had endured whispers in drawing rooms and cruel laughter behind fans. The maid's daughter, Dot the impostor, at Longbourn. Darcy, quote, folly. They had mocked his choice, ridiculed her lineage, and scorned their love as madness. She remembered the night Lady Catherine had stormed into Longbourn, demanding she renounce Darcy. He is the nephew of an earl. You are nothing but a nobody, daughter of a nobody. And yet she had been nothing to them, but never to Darcy. She turned slightly, her emerald silk gown whispering against the floor, and whispered into the curve of his ear, so only he could hear. It is my dream now coming true, to stand here at Pemberley, with you, recognized, honored, whole. Darcy's fingers tightened around hers. You have always been whole to me, Elizabeth, more than whole. You are my truth. She smiled, eyes bright. I endured every insult, every sneer, not because I believed them, but because I knew this day would come, that we would rise above it, that love, integrity, and time would right every wrong, and now to live the rest of our lives in glory. With you, it is what I ever hoped for. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her temple. You were always worthy of Pemberley, Elizabeth. Long before the world knew your name, I simply loved you before they understood you. Around them, champagne flutes clinked. Musicians tuned their instruments for a waltz. The Duke embraced his daughter, warmly whispering, You have my heart, my title, and my pride. You have earned it all. Later, beneath a sky scattered with stars, Elizabeth and Darcy stepped out onto the terrace. The crisp air carried the scent of burning leaves and distant rain. Below, the great house glowed like a jewel nestled in the hills. Tell me, Darcy murmured, do you regret any of it? The struggle? The secrecy? Elizabeth looked at him, moonlight caught in her chestnut curls. Never. Had we come to this without fighting for it, would it mean as much? I would rather have loved you through fire than be handed grandeur on a silver plate without you. He kissed her then, a slow, deep kiss that spoke of years of longing, of quiet walks on the moors, of letters written in candlelight, of every tear and triumph that had brought them to this moment. Inside, the orchestra began a waltz. The first dance was theirs. As they returned to the ballroom, hand in hand, the guests parted like waters before a royal procession. Lord and Lady Darcy, heirs of Pemberley, a love forged in defiance of convention, tempered by loyalty, and crowned at last by truth. The Duke watched them take the floor, his chest swelling with quiet pride. The future of Pemberley danced beneath a gilded ceiling, not in blood alone, but in courage, character, and a love that had refused to be broken. And in that grand hall, where power and privilege had gathered to witness a declaration, it was not lineage or wealth that captured the room's awe, but the sight of two souls, one scorned, now shining in the light they had earned.